The third class of mechanisms, or the second class of mechanisms, are incentive mechanisms. So incentive mechanisms, including taxing authority, can increase local powers or efficiency, but also introduces new relationships of dependency, as is the case with transfer of funds or patronage resources. A case study from the Philippines again illustrates how the central government supported a successful irrigation transfer through an incentive system. The National Irrigation Administration faced a financial crisis following a reduction in aid and the collapse of the international rice market. As a result, the National Irrigation Authority transferred management authority to local level irrigation associations. It awarded grants for larger repair work, supplied larger machinery for repairs, and paid group incentives for activities such as assuming responsibility for cleaning canals. In addition, it implemented an incentive system to promote compliance with collection fees. Irrigation associations could keep 2% of irrigation fees if they collected 50% of total invoices, and 15% of the fees if they collected 90% of the total invoices. The associations that received these types of assistance and incentives were 3 times as active as the associations that did not receive these extra forms of assistance, or these forms of extra assistance. Notice again that in this example, well-defined and clearly specified taxing mechanisms gained local bodies more resources, helped them regulate better, enforce rules, and pursue higher levels of activities, but in accordance with specific and specified measures and targets. Clearly, decentralized fiscal mechanisms can substantially increase local powers and capacities, even if they don't enhance local autonomy. And finally, the changes in and creation of decision-making arrangements and institutions to alter how local and central authorities relate to each other is perhaps one of the defining features of decentralization reforms. In some cases, decentralization reforms can be seen as constraining user group. So in a comparative study of irrigation systems in Rajasthan and Karnataka, in India, for example, Meisenbeck and Rajesh show how higher-level government authorities define and determine resource use rules and ask local community-level decision-makers to ensure that these rules are followed. Indeed, the situation is characteristic of how many governance reforms and illustrates why some local central articulation mechanisms are seen as a means to extend the reach of government into localities or to serve as direct links between the government and villages. But such a view also elides the fact that direct connection between local and central decision makers, that through this connection between central and local decision makers, local actors can invoke central authority to demonstrate their power and to enforce rules. New institutional mechanisms may also increase the accountability of local organizations and thereby reduce the likelihood of elite capture, improving local capacities to monitor and impose sanctions, and to develop conflict management skills. So I've described a whole range of ways in which information, incentive, and institutional mechanisms seek to limit autonomy at the same time as they enhance powers. But we also encountered cases in which decentralization or decentralization reforms seem to increase local autonomy. So what are the conditions under which decentralization processes are in fact associated with greater autonomy? So although much of the literature on decentralization supports the argument that reform processes increase local capacities and powers and reduce autonomy, there are cases where local decision makers have taken advantage of such reforms to strike for greater autonomy. In some instances, local actors have used strict reporting requirements or other information mechanisms to manipulate information to show that they are meeting centrally established requirements or targets. So Baird, in a paper in 2006, describes how central government fisheries production targets in Laos emphasized the importance of expanding agriculture ponds to provinces, but they didn't reward provincial actions or provincial activities that led to the creation of fish sanctuaries. So the provincial administrators met the central government's requirements by reporting that fish sanctuaries were aquaculture ponds. In Bihar and India, local level irrigation officials inflated the size of area receiving irrigation water to meet central government targets. A different set of examples comes from the mobilization of local level user groups and communities to create federations that can engage in bargaining and negotiations with central government agencies and thereby exceed the bounds that decentralization reforms seek to impose on local users and managers. Such examples are relatively more common in forestry, but they can also be found in irrigation and fisheries. In these situations where decentralization reforms are associated with greater autonomy at the local level, the common denominator is the mobilization of local users in activities that are not the objective or the mandate of decentralization reforms. Misreporting of information, abuse of local institutions to enable elite capture, and mobilization towards federated structures are all examples of local processes that exceed centrally mandated rules and arrangements in relation to decentralization. So power and autonomy, and I want to talk just a little bit about the difference between power and autonomy to instantiate some of what I've been saying about how decentralization reforms increase powers but limit autonomy. And although it is unnecessary to traverse the vast scholarship on power to make the points advanced in this talk, it's still useful to briefly examine three key approaches to studying power in the social sciences. And these are agent-based approaches, structural approaches, and post-structural approaches. Agent-based notions of power are captured in Dawes' formulation of A getting B to do what B would not otherwise do. This way of thinking about power has four key features. Power is relational, it's observable, it's subjectile, so it's from the perspective of agents, individual subjects, and it's negative.